Okay, so here we are with our original M60 paint job here, and I'm going to do is bring out these textures into Photoshop so I can start preparing them. So what we do is we go to the diffuse channel here and just right click on any one of these and say export channel to PSD. Okay, and I've already done this one time, but I deleted it so you can see what happens. M60, this is the main piece, this is the diffuse. It's very, very important that you name this correctly for organization later. And what it's going to do is going to take a second, and it's actually going to pop up Photoshop and automatically open the file for us. Okay. Now you can see here that it opened up this main diffuse here. I'm going to shrink this just a little bit just to make sure that it's within view. Hey, not that much. Okay. You can see we've got all our layers here. But what you'll also notice is that because we had those extra UV layout channels, that we've got these U2 V1, U3 V1, and those are the other tiles, okay, as they go over. So what I'm going to do is just export out my 3 channels for now, okay? Get my specular, right click and Computer Freaks, okay? Export channel to PSD. Okay, now I'm just going to rename diffuse here to spec, and it'll open up the first one in Photoshop automatically for me. Okay, and again, we now have 3 more. Okay, it opened up this one and it opened up this one. So I'm going to work on these one at a time as I go through. Okay, I go back to Mudbox and then I pull out my bump mat. Okay, which is a lot of layers, so this might take a little while. This file here is rather heavy. So export channel to PSD, and this is going to be called my bump. Okay, take a second. And there she blows. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to close these. I'm not going to re-import. And what I'm going to do is just open my ammo bag file. I don't need to save anything. I haven't done anything. Okay. Here's the ammo bag. I'm going to right click here, export channel to PSD, and this is going to be M60 ammo diff use. Okay, save. It's going to pop that open in Photoshop. However, I'm going to close it because I don't want to work on that one yet. And you'll notice that I've only got one file here, and that is because, close that, I've only got one UV tile here. Okay, if I had another one, if it breached over, it would give you a second file. So if you're ever painting on something and you save out a channel and you notice that you get this extra Photoshop file for U2 V1, chances are that somewhere out here there's a little triangle or something that you missed. So just check for that if you get that problem, and then you can always re-export the OBJ and re-import the UVs on it. And as long as you just move that one and don't move everything else around, all your paint and everything should still be okay. So let's get the specular channel out, export channel to PSD. You can see this is going quite a bit faster now because this file is nowhere near as heavy. Okay, save. Again, it's going to pop it open in Photoshop. I don't know if there's an option to turn that off. I personally actually don't like that it does that, but I can see the use for it. I do rely on it a little bit. And export the bump map. You can see we're getting quite a large number of Photoshop files here, but it is going to boil down and into much less. Okay, just close that. We'll file, open up our bullet paint, bullets paint mud, hit open. Don't need to save, haven't done anything. Okay. Export channel to PSD. 60 bullet diff. Okay, close it. Close that. Export channel to PSD from my specular. 60 spec. Just close it. Export channel to PSD for my bump map. Okay, now that's closed. Now what we're going to do is for each one of these textures we're going to work on pretty much 3 at a time. What's going to happen, so I'm trying to think here, every once in a while you do want to come back to Mudbox and make a fix. However, for performance sakes, considering that I'm recording, I'm just going to close Mudbox and work strictly in Photoshop here now. So, if I take a look here, okay, it's going to be a little difficult because of the small size of the capture window. I'm going to hide the UV template because I really don't need it. Okay, but if I inspect it, you can see that everything bleeds outside of that UV template, that padding. You can see here that the dirt, I hate that the dirt does pass outside. Okay, that ensures that your seams are a little bit less. You know, hit Control 0 to get back to full view. Control colon or semicolon will hide your grid. Okay. Control quotes, sorry, or semicolon. And really, I can pretty much just export this as is. However, what I want to do is I want to combine my specular channel with it for the most part. Okay. But I want to do a little bit of management here because my original material, you can see that it's kind of this blue color, and I don't want my specular to come out blue. And what they do is when you export it out, this is basically the material color that you get in Mudbox. This is the background material color, and they lock them. Same thing with the UVs. You can see this little lock right here. So what I need to do is actually hit this lock here, and then if I hit Control, Shift, and U, it's just going to desaturate it for me. So this will be my base specular level here, which will sit on all of the plastics and stuff, which is going to give it much less of a specular value. Now here's the part where basically we're going to need to work this for our engine. It's quite possible that I'm going to want this to be much brighter. It's quite possible I'm going to want it to be black. I'm not really sure yet until I get it in there to see. So this pretty general 50% gray is a good launching platform for me, and you can see I've got all of my actual specular details are in here. So what I need to do now is get this into my diffuse file as the alpha channel, and it's really simple. You just come over here to channels, just hold Control, click the thumbnail for RGB, okay? Then if you use your marquee tool, all you got to do is find a spot in the white where the cursor, you can see my cursor change. It's got that little dashed line box next to it. I'm just going to click and hold this, okay, so I'm moving it around. I'm going to drag it up here and wait a second until it pops that file open. Now I'm dragging it here, and once I'm still holding the mouse, once I'm here, I'm going to hold down Shift and let go of the mouse. Okay, and that makes sure that it's in the exact same position. These are exact same size files. They're both 2048, so it comes down the exact same position. Now it does give me an alpha channel here, but I don't want to use that, so I have to dump it. Then you hit this button down here, which will save selection as a channel. And now if you look at this channel, I hit Control D here to deselect. If I look at this channel versus this file, Control D here, and swap back and forth, you can see that they're pretty much exactly the same tone. Okay? Because the alpha channel is basically like almost like a transparency type of layer. So now in my diffuse layer I have this alpha channel, and if I ever need to, I can always adjust this contrasts and whatnot to really work on how I want this whole thing to blend. So I don't necessarily have to come back here. However, if I need to change one particular thing, keep hitting pads here, which I don't even want pads. Okay, just dump that. You can see I've got this layered. Okay, got my base specular. Okay, I've got my scratches. Let me Control Alt 0 will zoom you into 100%, which is pixel for pixel. Okay, this is your final quality. Okay, I've got my gouges, and I've got my edges. Okay, now my edges are, for some reason, really not showing up at all. And it's 100%. If I hold Control and click this, you can see that my edges really got boiled down to this one little spot right here. So something actually kind of went wrong, I think. But for now, I gotta see what's going on here, because you can see that I pretty much lost those edges. So what I have to do is I actually have to go back to Mudbox and kind of inspect what happened there, which is unfortunate. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video and spare you all of that opening of Mudbox and opening that file. That file takes a little while to open and everything. So let me find out what's going on with the edges there really quick. And actually, while that's opening, because it's still going, you can see I actually have, let me make sure that my channels are showing my RGB. If you look here, I do have the edges here. So I could just cheat and hold Control to get that, come to my channels here, and if I zoom in, just fill that on my alpha channel with white. And that's going to be the final result anyway. Okay? I'm really not sure what happened with Mudbox. I'm going to try to swap over to it. It's quite possible, if I hide my diffuse and I hide my bump, my edges here, let me isolate that. You can see that a lot of it's missing for some weird reason. It might have got deleted or collapsed. So really what I want to do is duplicate that out again, bring it down, and if I show it, it's there. You can kind of see it there. Okay, especially if I make that fully white. So I'm really not sure at what point that happened. I'm sure if you're watching the video, and if I go back and watch it again, that I can find out where that happened. But yeah, at some point I lost that edges layer, and fortunately it was messed up here too. You know, so at the very least it makes it makes sense. So what I'm going to do, I don't know if I should have done showing the bump map, that's fine, is I'm just going to save this scene just so that if I ever do come back here to do more edits and re-export, I'm okay. However, what I did in Photoshop, copying that one particular layer's transparency and filling in the off channel, is essentially going to give me the exact same results. Like I said, all of these layers are built, and a good amount of them are copies of each other, and we can basically just go with that same theory. Now I'm gonna close Mudbox, and like I said, because they're here, we can use that same theory in Photoshop. We can reuse layers as we see fit, and this is why it's an important step to come in here and really make sure that you inspect what you're doing. Okay, because I've got all of this stuff here, and now my channels has that. So really, I'm good. Okay, I'm ready to export. I don't even need to show this layer because this layer is fully in view. Now I gotta make sure I'm on RGB here. Okay, but I want my dirt and all that in there. So all I gotta do is now save this out. And I'm gonna make a new folder here and just call this TGA. And I'm just gonna swap my format to TGA. Okay, this is the main piece. I want to make sure alpha channels is checked here. Okay, hopefully this is all in view. Hit save. And to maintain an alpha channel, you need it to be 32 bits. If you make it 24 bits, there's no alpha channel. So that's the only thing. Don't hit compress. Just hit OK. Okay, so this one, these are done. So, and I don't want to make any changes to my original files. Okay, now let's get the bump map. And I did say that I wanted to fix this here, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to show my UVs here, and I just need to find the right layer, whichever layer I turn off. Okay, it's this paint layer here. So what I'm going to do is zoom in on this guy. I'm going to make myself a new layer, and I'm going to use my paintbrush here, and I want to adjust my settings because I want this to be good. Now I don't want 100% hardness. I don't want that super sharp fall off. Go about, I don't want it to be super soft either, so I'm going to go about 70% and then give it a test. I want to match my size, and it's the right bracket. Okay, it's about there. I'm going to paint this in black, and I'm going to try to start right in the middle. Just one click, and then I'm going to go to pretty much right here. Now what I want to do is I kind of want to follow my geometry some. I'm going to end it right there. Okay? Now considering that there's a little bit of distortion here, so I'm right on that edge, so I'm going to go right on that edge, and then butt my brush right there into the corner. Okay, and I'm just going to go down the line here. I can't just copy this because the way the UV layout is, it's a 1-for-1, so it had to do a little, it did warp things a little bit. Okay, you can see this one's a little crossing over on the left, and I'm just going to try to maintain that same spacing as I go throughout here. Okay, really trying to make sure I follow that within some tolerance. Okay, it's not going to be so awful if I get a little bit off, but I don't want to go a little off at all. What's important is that I get the center of this in the same spot, because I have to do that here to make sure there's no seam running down the center. Okay, it's about there and there. This is going to take a bit of a minute here. So what I'll do is I'll do one side, and I'll pause it and just complete it. It's not going to take forever. It's going to take about 3 minutes or so, because I want to be very careful. So I don't want to rush this, and I'm clicking and I'm holding shift and I'm clicking, okay, again, just in 3 spots. And there's not much difference in the line. However, I don't want to just click here and click here because that loses the curve. Okay, let me undo one more time. So those markers are helping me as I come in later, because painting this on the model was a right pain in the bum. And some things are. Some things are just easier to lay out with better tools. If I wanted to use a curve here, I could. I could have used curves in Mudbox as well, but again, no matter what, I end up having to turn the model as I work. So it's really, I'm just going to go ahead and do it while I record. That way I can yap more of my ramblings. But like I said, having to turn the model breaks your stroke. Now what there is actually out there is, a friend of mine got this, and I'm jealous, it's called a 3D mouse, and it's basically almost like a left-hand analog stick, that you can pull in and out and twist and turn and push forward and backwards. It's basically like a 3D joystick that you can lift up and down as well. And apparently what you can do with it is, while you are using your right hand to maintain a single stroke, your left hand can rotate the model and your stroke doesn't get lifted up. If you're doing it with a Wacom or a mouse, you can only do one stroke as far as you can see on the model, and after that, basically, you have to let go and pick it back up again, which means you have to restart the stroke again. And anybody who's done this for enough time knows that starting and stopping a stroke midway through always causes a minor amount of headache, trying to get the next stroke to not bulge or bunch up at the point where you lift it off and want to start again. It's actually the same thing in sculpting as well as painting, because it's just not mathematically exactly in the same spot. Usually you're always like a pixel off, and in most cases you don't always have sub-pixel control. It depends on the quality of your mouse. The mouse I'm using, which I'm using here, I'm not using my pen tablet because this would be too hard for me to oops, I don't want to hold shift when I first. The reason that I'm using my mouse is because the pen tablet's a little, it's a slight bit shakier. It's a little bit more of a free-form tool for me. Okay, it's closer to a pencil. And a pencil is actually different, because as soon as I touch my canvas with the Wacom, then it instantly starts doing its thing. However, like a real pencil, you can touch the paper and steady your hand and just not press that hard, and you get you can anchor it without actually putting down any lead or ink or whatever you want to do. Now I'm going to hit E here. Hardness and spacing's 1%. Okay. Just hide that, and I'm going to shrink it down. And I just want to make sure I don't breach anywhere, and I'm just shift clicking across here. I don't want to breach over into any of these other shapes. I don't want that little black spot to show up. Here it's okay, but right here you can see it's getting in there. So I'm at 100% there. Just wipe that one out. And that's probably actually going to be okay. Now if I hide that, what I can do here is I can just use my, whoa, the light went all blank. I don't know what's going on there. What's the deal with that lasso? I have no idea. I don't even know what's going on. So I think I'm just having some kind of a program error. I think messed up my cache or my memory or something is freaking. So I'm just gonna wipe it by hand. And then I'm gonna put that layer on, and I'm gonna make it about 30% so it's not so deep. Okay? And there we go. And I think it'll come out okay. We'll have to see. And I believe everything else is okay. I am showing my grid there, so the Control Alt 0. Now I just want to kind of check my layers because, like I said, in Mudbox, some of these things, the bump map tends to be a lot stronger compared to your settings. However, when you come here to Photoshop, some of those things are not as apparent. Okay. See, my gouges layer is 3%, and I can't even see it. I don't even know where it is, so I'm just going to go 100%. Okay. And you can see here it's very, very black, which means it's going to be very, very there. So what I'm going to do is about 60%. Just I don't want it full black. And this is another one where I'm probably going to have to tune. You can see this is 1%, so that's not doing me any good. But however, again, I don't want these to be so deep that they just, you know, make the model a big noise fest. So I'm going to go about 10%. Okay. Check my plastic bump here. Again, I can't see it anywhere. I don't even know where it is. Okay. So it's going to go 100%. And then I'm going to drop it back down to, I'm going to try 20. Okay. And then it's at least there. Alright. I'm just going to do these layers one at a time against the gray background. Now here's the rubber, so I'm going to try that at 20. Okay, you can see that that's there. Okay, my manufacturing lines are 10%. However, I want that to be probably a little bit higher. Okay, this just takes knowledge of doing this several hundred times. Bring that to 30%. And running the Nvidia normal map filter, the DDS plugin, which is actually free. Okay, this one I've already tuned. Now let's check my etching here. It's at 3%. Just gonna hit 0, and I don't want that as deep either. If I Control 0, this is where I put my two little labels. Okay, and I want that to be probably 10%. Okay. Now I can show all my layers. Okay, so I got all my layers here, and I'm just going to zoom out. And then what I'm going to do, you can see these are overlaying each other. I got noise inside of the lines and outside. Okay, is now I just need to run a test. So what's going to happen is I need to run the Nvidia filter here. So what I need to do is I need to actually flatten this stuff. So if I just select all these layers and hit Control Alt Shift and E, okay, all the hotkeys, Control Alt and Shift, and hit E, and what that does is it flattens it but makes a copy. So these layers are still here. So now I can take this layer and go up to my filter, Nvidia Tools Normal Map Filter, and I want to explain the reason why we're getting a difference between how much opacity is required here and how much opacity is happening in Mudbox. And the reason here is because of the scale. If I put this to like 100, you can see in this little preview how deep, dark, and just absolutely disgusting this gets. And that might be, I haven't ever actually experimented with this, that might be the same amount of bump effect that you have in Mudbox, but it could also be possibly 10 or whatever. However, I like to settle on 4 because it's just nice and soft. So I increase my layers to make up for that. And I hit OK. It's going to take a minute. And if I come in, you can see that my normal map isn't very abrasive. And I don't want it to be abrasive. Okay? I don't want this to be harsh. I want it to be there in all cases. Okay, here's my, look, it's a smiley face. but I don't want it to be so much that it's overly sharp and aliased. Now in the case of this one, I'm actually going to save this file because two things. One, I'm not planning on importing this back into Mudbox. If I need to make an actual paint edit, what I'll probably end up doing is making a brand new layer and exporting that layer and just slapping it on top of here. That way my workflow doesn't kind of get ruined. And it keeps this here, and what I can do is I can always delete this layer. If I go into UDK and I find out these aren't deep enough, I really need these to be much deeper, I can just hide this layer, take that extra layer that I created, and change its opacity. Okay, if I hit V, I get the move tool. If I'm on the move tool, not a brush, I can just hit 0 will give me 100%. I can hit 9 will give me 90%. 8 will give me 87, 6. You can see the number changing here, and you can see this getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. Now if I press two buttons really fast, say 78, 78, I can get 78% here. Okay, I can go 3, 3. Okay, but if I just give it a pause, it's almost like double clicking. If I just give it a pause, hit 3, wait a sec, and hit 4, I can do that. But if I try to go too fast, let me try 3 and then 4, I end up with 34. So I just have to go 3, then 4. Just give yourself a small break. Same thing as double click. Okay, so I ended up with 30%, and I'm going to show that. And again, I'm going to save that file, because that way it's going to be much quicker for me to make edits to the opacities and things of this layer. And if I find out one of these things is shifted in a crappy position, they look, they're not great. I mean, you can see here that the spacing is not great. And if that's so obvious on the model that it bugs me enough, and that I think that the player will notice and not like it, I will come back and fix it. If I notice that in game that this is ugly, these lines here, which they look hideous here. I mean, they look awful, but it's like I said, it's a really difficult thing with the tools that I've got to bridge around from one side of the model to the other. And I can maybe get away with using symmetry, but that tends to give you a whole host of other problems too. So there's things I can do to work it, and you can remember that was the one part of the grip lines here, with one part of the model that actually frustrated me enough to even mention that I was slightly frustrated, which I wasn't like pissed, but still it didn't go as good as I'd hoped or wanted or clean. It wasn't very freeform. So all I'm going to do is hit Control Shift and S for Save As. Go into my TGA layer. Now I'm just going to rename this to NM for normal map. Okay, change it to a TGA. I got alpha channels checked here, which I could uncheck, but it really doesn't make a difference if I just come over here and make this 24-bit. There's no alpha channel in there anyway. So this actual texture set, which is a diffuse and a normal map, is actually done. And the diffuse also contains the alpha channel for the specular level. Okay, so it's done. And I can do some math in UDK if I need to bring in some color or whatnot. I can multiply it by the diffuse and do a bunch of stuff in the material. However, say if I just wanted to make this normal map, if I realize this normal map's too weak in UDK, sure, I could do math. I could multiply it by a vector and increase the blue and whatnot. But really, then my material is adding a little bit of complexity merely to make this more obvious. So why even do that? Why just make this more stronger, coming out of Photoshop. That way your material's safer. So it's a balance between material complexity and your texture settings. Some things, there's really nothing you can do in the texture to make it more brighter or whatever, because it's going to ruin another piece of the texture that you don't want to happen. So you need to use UDK's material nodes, all the multiplies and adds and linear interps and all the crap that's available there, which is a lot of stuff, which is really cool. It's fun. So it's actually my favorite part of UDK is the material system. But like I said, a lot of times if you can fix the texture, because then you wipe those nodes, you have less calculations, and you're a little bit safer. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back off one here, and I'm going to show this by details so I can get all my names and make sure I can see all my names. Now I'm going to get my main bump U2V1, my main diffuse U2V1, and my main spec U2V1. Okay, make sure that the same here, U2V1, and that it's the main, and main. Okay, bumps, diffuse, and spec. I'm going to open these three, and this is the other piece of my gun. Okay, so if I show my bump layer, you can see that not a lot's showing up because all those are 3%. Here's my main diffuse. Okay, and you can see that my dirt is actually kind of missing, as is, oh, you know what, U2V1 is actually the ammo bag. Okay, so I really don't need that because I painted the ammo bag separately. I decided later to paint the ammo bag separately, so U2V1, U2V1, and U2V1 here for the spec, diffuse, and bump, I can actually delete those because those are the exact same thing as my ammo bag. So U3V1 is the one that I want. Okay, so let me just go here and say File, Open, U3V1, U3V1, and U3V1. Okay, my third U tile, and hopefully this looks better. Okay, there's my spec for it. Here's my diffuse, which is showing the dirt everywhere nicely, and here's my bump, which again is roughly the same thing. So I'm going to work on my diffuse first, okay, which means I just need to pull my specular over. Now again, I just want to desaturate this guy. Control Shift and U. It's an automatic desaturation. And then go to my channels, hold Control over RGB. Okay, hit M. That'll give me my marquee tool up here. And just click in a spot that's highlighted and start dragging it up to this diffuse one and hold it. Then bring it into the canvas, which disappeared for some dumb reason. Then hold Shift and then let go of the mouse. Okay. Now I can dump my alpha channel and dump that as the alpha channel. Hit Control D. Now you can spec my alpha channel, and it's okay. Okay, I might have to tune this. I don't know yet because I haven't brought it in, but I'm done. Okay, so I just go into TGA. Now this one, I need to actually name differently. Okay, so this is no longer the main piece. This is going to be the receiver diffuse. Okay, alpha channel's checked. 32 bits is checked. Remember, it's going to kind of retain what I've done. It was on 24 bits because I exported my bump map. Okay, so hit OK. Alright, and for now it's okay, so I can just close those. I don't need to really make any edits. Now again, with the bump map, which is the one where I kind of need to go in and do most of my editing, what I'm going to do is if I open recent, it's over on the left, but I can still see this list of things that I've opened recently. Actually, I'll just go open. Back it off here. This M60 main bump here, which you can see it has that normal map layer on there. One of the handy things about actually saving this file now is that I have the same layers here: bump, base, gouges, bump, scratches, bump, as I do here: bump, base, gouges, bump, scratches, bump. So what I can do is actually come here and say, okay, well, what's my, let me just bring that up nice and big. Hey, you stay up there. Alright, bump base I set to 50%, so it's going to come here. Bump base is 50%, okay. Gouges bump is 60%. Gouges bump is 60%, okay. Just going to match them. Scratches bump is 10%. Scratches bump is 10%. And my plastic bump is 20%. So plastic bump is 20%. Okay, I just hit 2. Rubber is 20%. Rubber is 20%. Manufacturing is 30%. Manufacturing is 30%. Okay. Just going to go through them. Paint layer 1 is 30%. Paint layer 1 is 30%. And I don't have this layer 1 because this piece is not there, so I can skip that. Etching is 10%. And etching is 10%. Okay. Now I can hold Shift and click down here. Selects them all. Control Alt Shift E gives me an extra copy, and then I can just hit Control F, and that will apply my last filter, which is my normal map filter. And you can see, no, I can't. Okay, Control Alt Shift or Control Shift F didn't do it. So all I gotta do, it's trying to apply some. I don't know why it does that. I'll be honest with you, but for some reason it treated it as a completely separate layer. But if I just hit the normal map filter again, which is technically the same thing, there we go. Here's my bump. Okay, very subtle in there, possibly too subtle. Okay, quite possibly too subtle. I don't know yet. Until I get it on the model in UDK, will I really know if this is not enough? Alright, so I'm just going to save it as, actually I'm just going to hit Control S to save this Photoshop file so that I can come back and make clean and easy edits to these layers, and then recopy it, redo the normal map, and then Control Shift S, TGA here, and then this is the receiver, so I'm going to click that to get the name, and this is the NM for normal map. Okay, save. Don't need an alpha channel, so 24-bit. Okay, and I'm good. Don't need to save anything else. Okay, file, open. Come over here, and now let's get our ammo bag. Okay, there's only 3 here. So if you're just painting a singular object with one texture tile, this will be the extent of what you have to do in general. So let's go to the diffuse here. Hide my UV layer. I'm going to unlock this layer, and I'm going to hold Alt and isolate that layer, and then click that. What I'm going to do is hit B to get my paintbrush, and then hold Alt to sample this color. Okay, and then I'm going to do Alt backspace to fill that color in, so that there's no accidental picking up of that weird stupid tan, and I can just show the rest of my layers. Okay, you can see that here's my diffuse texture. Okay, now I can do a little trick here too. Let me check my specular level here. Let's hide my UV template. I'll unlock this, hit Control Shift U just to get that flattened down. Now if I zoom in here, just going to take these layers, that's 100%, 100%, 100%. Okay, here's my specular level here. It's very dark except for the metal, right? I mean, that was how I designed it. I didn't want a lot of specular on the cloth itself. Unless it was wet, you know, it's not going to pick up a whole lot of highlights, it being a very fibrous cloth. So I'm going to stick with this for now. Just going to grab my RGB by holding Control and clicking on the thumbnail. Then I'm going to hit M so I can have a marquee so I can move my selection. It doesn't look like anything got selected here, but it did. It is there. It's just, if it's under 50%, Photoshop doesn't draw the little marching ants dashed line here to make sure that this doesn't become some insane cluster of black and white spots that are flashing all over the place, and you can't tell what's going on. So it doesn't select anything under 50% visually with this outline. So I'm just going to click that, drag it up here, click to hold it in here so that this border goes black. You can see that now I'm here, and then hold Shift as I let go of mouse, and now I can slap that into the alpha channel, and you can see it's carbon copy. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cloth base and make that the only layer that I show. Okay. And I'm going to make it 100%, and then I'm going to go to my channels and I'm going to copy that RGB. Okay. I'm going to hit M. Now I need to actually, because it's so spotty, I need to find a spot somewhere in here where my cursor changes. You see that right there? Click and drag that up to my diffuse layer. Hold Shift and let go. And then I'm going to hit Control H to hide all that messiness so I can see what's going on. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to hit Shift and Backspace, and that's going to allow me to fill with white, which is my foreground color, at any opacity that I want. I'm going to try 10%. And you can see that what I've done is I've taken that that bump information, and put that into the specular so that it's a little bit brighter at the top, and then inside each one of these fibers it's dark. And this is going to further help pick up this detail, basically, having it also present in the specular. And because I only copied that cloth layer, I didn't affect anything on the metal because it didn't have that cloth on there. Okay? I'm pretty sure anyway. I don't really see the cloth showing up. But remember, I did cover the cloth with the metal. And actually you can see that I do have the cloth here. I can see it there. So I'm going to undo. Okay, just hit Control D real quick. I'm going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show the metal there. Okay, it's just showing it, and I'm going to just temporarily here, I'm going to hold Control on the metal. Okay, and I'm going to mask that out of here. Okay, and it came out inverted, so I'm just going to highlight this and hit Control I. And if I hide this, you can see now that the metal is actually cut out of here temporarily, and I can always dump this mask. So grab my RGB again, find a spot, there it is, drag it up here, and then hold Shift and let it go. And then just hit Shift Backspace, and I can do the same thing again. Now everything else got picked up. So let me see what else could I possibly be picking up here. There should be no other layers visible. So what I'm going to do actually, is with that selection from my RGB, I'm going to hold Control, Alt, and Shift, and you can see I get an X on my cursor here. And what that is that it's basically like an intersect. So I'm just going to intersect that with this, and then my mask. Now that should technically ensure that this gets cut out, hopefully. So I'm going to drag that back up, drop that down here, and Control H, go to my channels. I want to make sure that not everything gets brightened up. So I hit Control Z, Control Z. I'm going to zoom in here. I think, just to make sure, I'm just going to undo back and forth. You can see that this does no longer brighten. Okay, so I had like a 1% or 2% selection here that wasn't showing up, that I couldn't tell was there, but now it's gone because I intersected it with just this layer. Okay, so now all of my other stuff doesn't get messed up. Granted, it really doesn't matter if it got hit here, but however, if this was more stuff in here, there was a piece of plastic and there was other things that were taking up this blank space, it would have brightened those things. And maybe it was, if it's 1%, it's not going to hurt anything, but I do want to make sure that at all times I know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm in full control, and it's up to me what's happening, and I don't just, it screwed up, so I'm just going to say, whatever. I don't like that. I like to be in full control and know what the heck is going on. So I come here. I now have a decent specular. I have a pretty good diffuse texture here. So I now can just Control Shift S. I can call this M60 Ammo Diff and make it a TGA. And I do want my alpha channel, so I got to make sure 32-bit and hit okie doke. Okay, come over to my bump, and I can dump this mask now, so I don't need that. Just delete it, don't apply. Show all my layers. You can see they're all 100%. However, this may be too strong, so, and I feel it is, so I'm going to make it about 60%. Okay, click on here, hold shift, and click the name here. I don't want to, well, actually it doesn't matter. If I hold shift, it just drags down lines. It's kind of like selecting in Windows. And then Control Alt Shift E, give me a duplicate of all that combined into one layer. Filter, Nvidia Tools, Normal Map Filter. You can get this filter off of Nvidia for free. You can do a search in Google for Nvidia DDS filter or Normal Map Filter, and it'll find it for you. No problem. Okay, and you can see that my etching is in there. Okay, and my edge between my cloth and my metal is there. Okay, right there you can see that there's an edge going down that to make sure that this looks a little bit bumped up higher than this, right? So this should be pretty good. What I might want to do, just to illustrate how I can actually use some of these things later in Photoshop, some of these layers, I'm going to dump that. I take this stitching, and what I'm going to do is double click it so I can get my layers. I'm going to give it a bit of a drop shadow, okay? But my distance I want to be 0 so that it's right on there. Now if I make it really obvious what's going on here, okay, I don't want a lot of size, I don't want a lot of spread, but let's just make it real obvious where it is. So I can if I change my spread, it makes it so it's very, very obvious. And then what I can do is I can dial that back. Then I can change the opacity to be just a little bit. And then what it does is it kind of makes each stitch dip in a little bit because there's that black there. Okay? And let's just see if that might not be something that we want, but I'm pretty sure it's going to work out okay. So Control Alt Shift E. Okay. Filter, Video Tools, Normal Map Filter, and just hit OK. And now each one of these actually dips down a little bit before the stitch comes up. So what that does is actually kind of insets it a little bit to show that the threads are pulling into the cloth, they're compressing the cloth, and that may or may not look good. It may look like chaos on the model and really doesn't work out nicely at all. But you also got to remember that these are brighter on the diffuse texture, so I'm thinking only, is that it's going to work out okay. So we're going to give it a shot. And that would have been something I could have done in Mudbox. However, what I would have had to do would have been duplicate the layer, adjust the color so it was black, and then manually blurred the whole thing. By doing a drop shadow, it just makes it a lot easier. So TGA, ammo, and this is the normal map, not the bump anymore, okay? And I don't care about that. It's save, 24-bit, okie doke. And I'm going to save this Photoshop file again so I can make further edits. I can dump this drop shadow here if I really want to, if I find that screwed everything up, whatnot. I have all of these files saved. It's all painted, all layers, all the details and informations are there, and now I can adjust it however I want. Because I did that extra edit here to the specular map, I'm actually going to go ahead and save this one as a Photoshop file. Again, I'm not planning on re-importing these back into Mudbox. If I really need to make such a drastic change, I have to repaint something, I'm going to override it coming out of Mudbox. I'll just go there and re-export the channel. So bullet, get all 3 of the bullet files. Okay, go to my diffuse here, go to my layers, and I'm going to hide my UV. I definitely don't want, if I save out as a TGA with that there, that's going to be showing up on the model as a red lines everywhere, okay? It's going to look like a red wireframe, which you can use for cool effect if you wanted to, okay? I mean, I could make this just be an extra texture, so if you wanted an effect where you got like a, you know, wireframe overlaid on your model, you got the wireframe right here, you know? So feel free to use it if you really want. Now, what I do want to do is unlock this, isolate this, hit B, and then Alt to get that color, and then fill this background color with that color.
Now, unfortunately, this is exactly the kind of object that could come back and kick me in the dingus. Okay? It could be that my padding doesn't do good enough here. Okay? And this gray. I could end up showing a little bit of this brown across some of these edge seams, especially if I were to LOD this model, which I may end up doing, but for the most part on an LOD here I'm probably just going to delete it. So what I can do is actually kind of cheat. Don't disappear. I don't know why that's happening. That never happened before to me. It's a foist. So what I'm going to do is just zoom in here, use my paintbrush tool. I'm going to get kind of a large brush, and I'm going to sample this color here by holding Alt. And I'm just going to expand, and I'm going to hold Shift and do my right bracket, and that's going to actually harden the brush. If I hold Shift and do left, you can see it up here, the hardness. Okay, as I hold Shift and drag it up, I'm actually increasing the hardness of the brush, and I just kind of want to bleed this out some to expand that padding where Mudbox only gave me a 2-pixel border. I want to double, triple, quadruple overly do that. Keeping in mind not to get too close to this, I don't want any of this lead type color to show up on the bullet itself. And up here I can just be nonchalant about it. Okay, just okay. And then I'm going to sample this color, and I'm just going to expand that out. Now I can be as messy as I want, okay? And if I want to, I can give myself a happy face. A shoe, worst shoe ever. And a boat. All 3 of them. And no polygon's ever going to hit that, so whatever. Do it for fun, right? So, as my diffuse is okay, alright? And now I want to bring over my specular to it. Now in this case, because I want this pretty dull, what I'm going to do here is unlock this guy, and I'm going to hit D to get default colors back, which is black and white. Hopefully this is in view here. Black and white, and then Alt backspace, and I'm just going to make sure that my background is black. Okay. Everything else is actually pretty bright. However, you see I got scratches underneath it. Now let me see what happens if I use my marquee tool. It goes dark. It oops. I hit Control F on accident, which is last filter. I can use that, but for some reason I've got a glitch where everything disappears, and I just gotta guess what's going on here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna leave it as bright, and it's bugging me though because I kind of want to tone this back. I don't want this as bright. So I think the only thing I can do is actually close Photoshop and reopen it to kind of reset it. Let me see if I can't edit, purge all. Okay, that might be off the screen, but you can go purge all. It tells you can't undo that. And it's still not liking me, but if I go, I just went full screen, which definitely got it off the view, and that didn't help either. So I hit F again, and F again. I've got a glitch. And there's not a lot I can do about it. Look, everything disappears as soon as I start to try to drag out this marquee. So I'm going to pause the video and reopen Photoshop and pray that that fixes itself. However, before I do that, I'm going to save these edits here, just so you know that I did that. I haven't worked on this yet, so I close that and close that. I haven't really done anything to this, so except for turning that black. So I might as well save it. Then I can close it. Now I'm going to pause and reopen Photoshop. And just like that, like magic, I'm fixed. So there was something going on. I think that really huge scene in Mudbox pretty much just kind of screwed up my whole cache. Okay, so I'm going to use this rubber band type one here. If I hold shift, you can see I get a little plus. I can add to my selection. Now I can let go of shift, and I can just click around here. And just double click anywhere. Now Control Alt and E, so what it's going to do is it's going to make a copy of this on this layer that I have selected. Nope. Control Shift and E. Nope. Control Alt J. Control Alt J. Okay, it's J. So I'm going to say OK. And what that did is it made a copy of it. I don't want that. Control Alt and Shift J. And what that, okay, that worked. Just to show you, what that did is that made a copy. It basically split that to a new layer and got it off of the old layer. Okay, which is handy. So it's Control Alt Shift and J. So now I can take this layer, just hit V, and I can dial it back to whatever I want. Okay, my scratches, let's just dial those back a little bit to like 60% or whatever. And this I want to stay full white. However, this tip here, which is here, it's gonna separate that guy. Okay, Control Alt Shift J. I really don't want that to be picking up a whole ton of highlighting. What that means though is that if I look at my diffuse, I've got this little strip here where that lead bleeds over that a little bit. So what I'm going to do, it's on this layer, is hit W, keep a low tolerance. I do want it anti-aliased, and I want it contiguous, which means that it just refines it to its own space. And actually, I don't want anti-aliasing. Okay, that confines it there. Now if I use this tool here, so I get that particular cursor there, I can drag that to my specular, hold shift and let go. It puts it right there. Then what I can do is hit B to get my brush and sample this color and match that specular there, so that the lead bled over this. So I want to make sure that my lead is the same specular throughout. Okay, and I can always take this, and if I want to, I can darken it. Okay, wait, I still have a Control D here. I still had that selected, but I hit it. Control L for levels, and these are on the same layer, right? So what if I hit Control L and darken one? Does only that get darker? Is that doing anything? If I lock the layer and I fill it with black, I'm going to move this to the very top. That is really weird. Oh, it's set to 50% opacity. That's why it wasn't even really showing up. So I think if I do that to 100%, and let me just fill this with a crazy color. Okay, so it is picking up the right color, and if I go something dark, now they're an even tone. Okay, so it was 50%. That's why I couldn't tell what the heck was going on there, because it was over black. Okay, and I do want this just full blast white. I want this to be as shiny as it can with literally no detail in there. I'm looking at a bullet here, and there's absolutely, it's flawless. Okay, the surface is mirror almost. So this is a pretty good specular for the bullet, I think. Again, this is all guesswork in a way. Okay, I just have to get these things out of here to get them on the model to see what's going on. So now I can take that, copy the RGB here, drag it to my diffuse, hold shift and let go. You can see that it's shifted. Okay, and I can tell you exactly why that happened is because I had a selection here. So when I held shift, it wanted to center it on that selection. Okay, it was actually kind of handy. So if I deselect here, and then drag it back in again and hold shift, it's going to center it to the whole object, okay? It's not trying to center it based around a small little point there. So I can dump my alpha, create a new one, just check that it's there, and it is. And now I can officially save this out as the bullet diffuse. Okay, I do want my alpha channel, so I want to make sure I'm 32-bit. Okay, and now I can work on my bump layer. And really, for the most part, the bump layer is probably pretty good. However, here's my primer. I do want to exaggerate that some. I think if I do levels on it, I can brighten the whites and darken the darks and brighten the whites. So that's pretty exaggerated because it's a very, very definitive shape there. And then my markings, let's just go, yeah, well, I think 10% was actually good. So I'm going to make a copy of this. I do want to make sure this is, 50% gray, like bump map, so they always come in with that 50% gray. Control, Alt, and Shift and E makes a duplicate of that whole thing. Filter, Nvidia Tools, normal map filter, hit okie doke. And this is clearly there. And I've got some bump stuff. Keep it in mind, I can still blur things here if I wanted to. If I really wanted to, I could actually unify this to be clean. So, hey, why not? Okay, it's on my primer layer, or it's on my markings layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my circular marquee here, and I'm just going to make a circle there. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to fill with this particular color. Okay, now I'm going to double click that guy. I'm going to do an inner glow, and I want this to happen from the center. I want the choke all the way up, and I want to decrease the size a little bit, and then slightly soften it, and then match that. Okay, so then what I can do is just hold. Now here's the thing: if I hit Move and I hold Alt, I can duplicate this. But if I don't have anything selected, it gives me a new layer. However, if I hold Control and click it, and I have a selection, it duplicates it, but I don't end up with a new layer. And what I'm going to do is I want to actually show my wireframe here, my UV layout, because I want to kind of make sure that it stays centered and that they're the same size as well. Okay, and then I can basically go to my markings layer and just erase what was underneath there. Okay, so now there's nothing there. And now I have uniform, clean, easy to work with dots. So Photoshop to the rescue for that messy job I did in Mudbox. A lot of times, when you paint something in Mudbox, in some cases, you really just want to paint a marker guide, and then that you're gonna fix later. Okay, just Control Alt Shift E to make that copy. Okay, it's just something that you want to plop down. Sometimes it's just gonna be an X. It can be a pink dot just to show the center of where something's gonna be. Okay, you can see that those are there now, and that's gonna show up nice, as is everything else. Now I'm gonna undo and undo again, and I have decided that I want that to be a little bit darker. It feels a little too soft. Okay, so dupe all that out again. Filter, Nvidia Tools, normal map filter, and hit OK. And that's a little bit more apparent now. These markings, it's going to show up a lot cleaner on the model, a little bit more. And if it's too much, I can come back here and repeat that process. So Control S, save my Photoshop file. That way all these edits and stuff that I did are still there. Control Shift S, save as, and I want it to be a TGA, and I want it to be my normal map. Save, and I do not want the alpha channel, so I hit OK. And now, my TGA folder, if I show details, I've got one here, one texture, 2, 3, 4. Diffuse and normal for each one of these pieces of my gun. Okay? And that is all we need to do for the textures. So, the next phase of this tutorial is going to be to prepare the model itself for bringing into UDK so that we can combine these into one material. So I need to assign this stuff in max, okay, then I need to manage my UVs, and then I need to basically export that out, bring it into UDK, and then set up the material. So I'm kind of anticipating roughly about another hour left to go at the most, because as I've shown that it takes longer. I'm gonna save that. It takes longer to do this in save that in tutorial version than it would be to just do it. Usually I can get through doing all this stuff in roughly 15 to 20 minutes if I'm just kind of just going through click, 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 you know, save, click, 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 save. You know, I'm not worried about telling anybody anything, stopping, saying, oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, watch out. If this happens, let me show you what happens if this happens. I know those things are going to happen, so I just don't do them. You know, it goes a lot faster. So I understand that this, you know, it took an hour, but no, it won't take you an hour to do this. It'll take you 10, 15, 20 minutes. And if it's just one object, it's like 2.5 minutes to come in here, copy the alpha channel to your diffuse, save it, convert your bump map, you know, tune your bump map, make a copy of that layer, convert it to a normal map, and then save it out. And it's, you know, and then you're done, and then you can just go straight into UDK and, you know, export your model, bring it into UDK, set up a very simple single material, and you're done. You know, coming out of Mudbox, you know, the time between finishing in Mudbox to actually seeing it in UDK is very quick. But I do want to you know, make sure that I explain all of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and in this case, this is going an extra step because, like I said before, and I really want to hammer this one home, is that we are creating a merging material in UDK that is going to give us maximum amount of texture usage and space, high detail on the model, okay, without adding separate materials. And that's half of the point. The other half is just, hey, how do you paint, you know, metal versus cloth versus, you know, other stuff like plastic. And again, a lot of the magic, you know, is right here in the specular map. Okay, do not discount the specular map. You know, always factor it in. And in not every case do you actually need it. There are cases where, yes, you can use the diffuse texture as your specular map, or you can use the red channel of your diffuse texture as a specular map, and it works perfectly fine. However, not in every case. So if you just use your diffuse as the specular, you kind of just basically brightening your diffuse in where the light's hitting it because it stays that color and whatnot. You can desaturate it in UDK. There's a million different approaches to this, so that, you know, it's, you know, there's never any one set thing. This is just what I've come up with, and I've used this across multiple weapons now, and I really like the results. I think they look good in most lighting environments. It is something that I have been developing over the course of this particular project. It wasn't something that I knew how to do this before I started this project. So I do have a couple of early weapons in the game that don't follow the formula 100%. There's slight things, you know, that I really could and should go back and fix, and I probably will before I release the product. But like I said, it's just a process of developing and learning and doing it. You know, if I were to start a brand new project from this point forward and use this, I would make sure that I didn't really deviate too much from my amounts, the amount of specular, the amount of bumps and things that I did, just to make sure that everything was uniform across the whole project. You know, every individual item has a uniform style, not look. They're all going to be exactly the same. They're going to have their differences, to make sure that certain things come in and out and all that stuff. You got to kind of factor that in. If you're not the only artist on the project, you do want to work with the other artists to make sure that you guys are all on the same page with how your materials are going to look, how the lighting is going to be, and get everything dialed in. We already have the lighting for our game pretty close to set up, how it's all going to look up and everything, look and everything like that. So we developed our world before we developed most of our, at least some of our assets. We have obviously had to model the world to do that, but the objects in the world that are static and the objects that are for your player to interact with are slightly different. They have a small bit of a different approach, right? They're going to be in your hands. They're going to be dynamic objects. They're not going to be static objects. So they don't have light maps. They have certain amounts of specular and yippity dippity do, right? The list goes on and on and on and on and on about all the stuff you really kind of have to take into account, and this is just one of them. And hopefully so far, everything's been useful for you. And so that's really all I got to ramble about that. And in the next part, I'm going to be going into Max to prepare the model, and then after that I'll export that and I'll jump straight into UDK, get the material on there, marvel at it, pray that everything works out perfectly good, which I didn't see any problems coming up to this point. Okay, and I'll see you in the next part.